Hello viewers and welcome back to Dukascopy TV. Now joining us for the first in a three-part series looking at demographics, I'm joined by Mourtaza Asad-Syed. Mourtaza, thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Now in this first episode, as it were, we're going to be looking at the impact of demography on politics. So let's start firstly with a look at political regimes and the connection to demographic structure.
Yeah, what I looked at is how demographics impacts the whole story of mankind, the whole story of political structure, economic development, and even financial prices and asset prices, as we're interested as investors. But really, the first starting point, the cornerstone, I think, for the demographic impact in society is on the political arena. And what I have seen is that when you plot really different regime in terms of political regime as defined by the economists, I would say standard independent observer of all countries in the globe right now, is how much freedom there is in the government, how much freedom of press, how much parties there are, how much free elections, and sort of the degree of democratic intensity in a country. And you can, with this index, which is available on the internet and Wikipedia and updated every year by The Economist, you can make clusters, I would say. Authoritarian regime, like very little democracy intensity, to the other end of the scope, which is what they call full democracy. So that let's split all the countries in four buckets, given their score, into this 0 to 10 democratic index. And what we see is that they're pretty much around 20 to 50 countries in each bucket, among the 200 countries in the world. And what I looked at is really, are those countries behaving similarly in terms of demographic structure? Do they have something in common in terms of demographics? And going this way with the simplest variable on demography we have, to have something that is really powerful and not data mining in terms of results, is look at the median age of the population of those countries that are full democracy, and the median age of countries where the population is under authoritarian or very authoritarian regime. So to give you an example, an authoritarian regime would be what we have in North Korea. A full democracy would be what we have in Norway or what we enjoy here in Switzerland. In the middle, you would have countries like Senegal that would be in hybrid regime, and Mexico in what they call flawed democracy. This is, I would say, not my own category. It's just like independent numbers that I used. So the main conclusion from that is that the median age is very different between the four clusters. It goes from 23, the median age of a country where there is an authoritarian regime, to 39 of the average age of all the countries that have a full democracy or enjoy a full democracy, meaning an democratic index above 8. So I think not only they're very different, the standard deviation is also smaller than the difference, making this difference significant. But also there is a linear relation, meaning that the younger you are, the less democratic you are. And as long as you move up I would say, the aging process of a country, the more democratic you are.
And so this ties into quite nicely in terms of actual stability as well. We've got another example here.
So here is the event. We were looking at states, like stable state. What is the current state of a regime? But between those states, there is big events. And usually there's three kind of major social events in terms of internal dynamics. There are civil wars that are, let's say, the most deadly internal dynamics. That is an event, but it can last to a period, unfortunately. There are revolutions, which is, I would say, a shorter period would last about 1 year maximum in terms of what we use as a sample. And there is democratic movement, which is an event that could be looked at revolution, but given the number of casualties and also the length of the event, which is much shorter, I define them as more riots and democratic movement. And what happened is that usually a civil war goes from is often the case in an authoritarian regime and ends up again in an authoritarian regime or a hybrid regime. Revolution turns into moving a hybrid to a flawed democracy, or again going back to an authoritarian regime. So it's not really a big transition, a clear transition in regime. But democratic movement is really something that moves a country from a flawed democracy or a hybrid system to something much more open. In a sense, it's a victorious revolution. It's something that where there's in fact less casualty but much more political progress. The so what of the analysis is that those events happen again at a very different stage of age of country. So civil war happened when the country is very young, where the average population, median half of the population is usually below 20 years old, which makes the sad experience of having child soldiers very frequent in civil wars. But also it shows that there is no civil war happening after a certain age. So civil war is really a casualty of the youth, the youth of a country. And here we had done a sample since 1950. So after the Second World War, pretty much all the events recorded by the UN is being analyzed here. It's not just like the last 10 years. So we have all the events, and one example of a civil war here would be Korean War, Cambodian civil war, Vietnam War would be also considered like a civil war, Lebanon also, but it would be also Rwanda in the 90s, Mali right now, and Mali, just as an example, is about 16 years old as a median age today. So we understand really with the median age what is shaping, I would say, domestic violence, or what is seen as ethnic or religious issues. Clearly, in fact, the underlying factor is really the youth of a population that with very little stable institution is the fuel for those kind of violence.
If we take that in mind then, firstly I have to say I think my favourite part about this chart is the fact that France is essentially too old to ever have a popular uprising.
Yeah, as well as Europe, the whole
but
Europe.
We've got a very interesting example actually of two larger countries that we've got that are actually really the wrong way round ultimately.
Exactly, so using the relation which was not weighted per population, but really looking at all countries across time, there is this kind of relation. The more the country ages, the more democratic it goes, the more peaceful in terms of political event it goes. It sounds all good. What happened when you look at the snapshot today and you weight it by population, you still have the relation of this progression between median age and I would say democratic index. But India and China are really the odd parts, and since they have half of the population of the world, you cannot dismiss them. So, first conclusion is, of course, the relationship is not perfect one. It means it doesn't explain everything, and the political situation is also a result of many other factors. But it also can push you in thinking about what could happen to China in the next 10 years. It seems that China will have a tremendous drive to go more democratic. And maybe it's too old to have a violent transition, which is good news. So looking at the glass half full would be that China is very likely to grow democratic in the next 10 years, much faster than what people would expect, and in a much peaceful way than what we could have thought maybe 25 years ago. The other part is for India. India is surprising. Maybe it will be the other way around. It's quite young to be a democracy, to be so well advanced in the system, and maybe it's still very young to suffer some violent uprising. So, don't know yet. Maybe there is more uncertainty about India on the political front, but at least they're ahead in terms of democratic advance. What is very likely for India is that they will have a fantastic growth ahead in terms of economic, but that would be second part of our discussion. But clearly, the so what here I think is more on, there is something that will happen in China, very likely on the opening and the progress of the society, given just on the aging process, which is going to be very, very quick for China for the next 15 years. China is going to age very fast now.
If we take this whole argument then, really for you, what did you find it being kind of at the core of it, really, the overall conclusion, as it were?
The conclusion is that demography doesn't show at an instant, and it's a very long wave process, but at the end, it's the main driver of what really matters. So at the end, you cannot stop demography. It's like the waves and the tide in the sea. The tide will be always stronger than the wave, but most of the time you see under the waves. But at the end, the tide is really what the demography is behind. So you really have to look at a generational view, generally 20, 30, 50 years, to see this tide coming and going. And what is really interesting, and this is what the charts was here, is that of course you can have with this idea of demography and prediction of soft event or political transition, is that you can look at what are the factors that would drive the aging process, and what it seems, and the aging process driving the political transition. And it seems that female education is the one parameter that really impacts what is going to be the demographic transition, and that would lead to political transition. It's not that much literacy on average. It's really, if you look at male alphabetization, which means when 50% of male reach literacy, you see that it happens pretty much at age 18 on average, as a median age for the population on the country that reached this level for the first time. But it has no impact one generation later in terms of the aging process of the country. A country would age only for half a year in 30 years after this, they reach literacy rate for male. But when a country reaches literacy rate for female, then a generation after, they start aging. And then the age progresses by two and a half years on average. Meaning that with female literacy rate increasing, then the fertility declines, then the demographic transition starts, and the country starts to age slowly and slowly. But then surely, and that doesn't stop, and then it puts pressure, and then it creates all the conditions for political progress. As I think, going up the democratic index is a good thing.
Mourtaza, thank you very much for part one of this section. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mourtaza will be back to take a look at how demographics impact economics, so do stay with us. For now though, it's goodbye.